Well, good morning. I said to the foyer that this is going to be the best session all week. There we go. We're up here to make measuring impact cool again. Don't quote me on that. No, we're really excited, and actually for the topic of this session, measuring impact as an essential business practice, because we really feel both today and in the ecosystems of tomorrow it will be. And so I just want to briefly introduce our amazing panel up here, and then I'm going to get out the way and we're going to talk you through a very engaging session. So we've got Sylvie, who you all know, COO of Synapis, and just head honcho of so many things. Myself, let's jump to Adam, the CTO of ONOW, a really very cool, innovative tech solution to support entrepreneurs. He'll be showing more about that later. Jan, who's the co-founder and CNO of Leonardo. Both Jan and Adam are new this year, and all of us are excited. You might have seen Sylvie, Colin, and my faces before, but really excited about what Jan and Adam are sharing, both exciting tech solutions to impact measurement problems, Leonardo being one of them. Dr. Colin, who is part of the Angelo Network and co-founds Relative Group, a superb impact measurement and management consulting practice based in South Africa, and myself, who just is privileged to be part of this community and founded a company called Kingdom Impact focused on measuring spiritual impact. And so what we're going to talk about this morning is what impact measurement is. We want to give you some foundations, why it's important to you, what do we call it, and how do we do it. And just before we kick off, I want to tell you two main things that we really want to get out of today. One is to lay some foundations for you around impact measurement and management, because it can often feel overwhelming and daunting, but is super important, and we want to lay some simple foundations. And the second is to give you some practical tools to walk away from this session with. So we want to encourage you to stay super engaged. Think, what tool might I engage with leaving from here? We're all going to be fully available after this session, but this isn't meant to be just a thinking exercise. This is meant to be, we want to put tools in your hand as you leave from here. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sylvie to kick us off.
Thanks, James. Happy to be here, and this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. And Synapis, where I serve, has been very passionate about impact measurement for a long time. And we're still learning about how to do it better. But as all the panelists have been talking about this week as we've been preparing for the session, the first thing you have to do if you care about impact measurement is just start doing it. And I think at least what Synapis has done well is start measuring stuff. And then there's a lot of things you can do with that data and a lot of things that you can push yourself to do better once you kind of understand what's going on. So if you want to jump to the next slide, James, just wanted to kind of explain sort of high level, what are we talking about when we're talking about impact measurement? You may have seen this value chain before, going from inputs to impact. And when you're thinking about impact, many of you are very familiar with what that is. Some of you are like, I know, I've heard that word, but I don't really know what it is or how to get there. Impact is kind of what you want to see happen in the world because of what your business is doing or what your organization is doing. You all are running organizations or businesses that have kind of a main product. That product is having a lot of ripple effects because of the value it creates as a product, but also the value the business is creating even beyond that product. So impact is kind of like, what's happening? Why is the world a better place? Because of what you're doing. And if you think about what's the impact I want to see in the world, kind of take a step backwards to help yourself understand how do you know if it's happening. Because if you don't know if your impact is happening, it might not be happening. And I think you guys have heard this, measure what matters. This phrase, we measure what matters. If you care about impact, and I think all of us do, that's why we're here at Forge, if you care about it, you need to measure it, because if you don't measure it, you can't really prove that it's there. And we want to be serious about seeing the impact we care about happen. So to understand if that impact is happening, we have to think through what are the outcomes we want to see. What are the things we want to see happen in the world? What change happens because of what we're doing? And then work backwards even from there. So to see those things happen, what kinds of things do I need to be doing? What are the kind of immediate results I need to see if those outcomes are happening? So it's almost this like working backwards process of going back to like what I want to see all the way back to what do I need to be doing so that I can start checking off if those milestones that show me that impact is happening are in fact happening. That's kind of the way you set up your impact strategy to help yourself understand if you're really having the impact you want to have. You can go to the next slide. Some of you might have seen this before, but this is called the 5 dimensions of impact, and it's coming from an organization that is now called Impact Frontiers. And across all impact professionals, standard-setting organizations, monitoring and evaluation, this is kind of seen as the gold standard of the 5 ways to think about impact. So no matter whether you're an entrepreneur, no matter whether you're an accelerator for entrepreneurs, whether you're an investor, these 5 things are the 5 dimensions that will help you think through whether you're having impact and how you can tell. So the first 3 dimensions here are kind of simple. What outcome do you want to have? Who experiences those outcomes? And how much occurs? So, for example, let's say you're working with farmers and you want to see farmers earn more money every year. So you might say, what happens? What? Farmers earn more money. Who? Farmers. How much? 50% increase in their wages. So those ones are a little bit easier to understand. What, who, and how much. The second 2 are more complex, and we're not going to get into it so much in this session, but any of us would be happy to talk to you about it later on during Forge. But contribution is basically like, if your business didn't exist, would this impact have happened anyway? Because if it would, then you can't really say that your business is the one having the impact. So it's kind of a tricky one. It's a tricky one to measure, but it's an important one to think through of who really is the source of that impact. And I think it's very important for each organization to really try to define what is the unique impact that you're bringing to the world that nobody else is bringing. If you weren't there, it wouldn't be happening. And the last one, risk, is one that a lot of us don't really think through, which is, are there unintended consequences of the good things you're doing? Do you know what they are, and are you also measuring them? So one thing that we were talking about yesterday is, imagine that you're working 80-hour weeks as an entrepreneur, and so is your team, and you have this amazing product, and you're having this incredible impact on your community, but your whole team is burning out. Well, that burnout is a risk of your impact. It is a people risk. You might be impacting other people, but you might be burning out your own team. So I think thinking through those things is also an important part of impact, to make sure when you say, this is our impact, you're not hiding some negative impact kind of under the carpet. If you want to hit the next slide, Colin, just one last slide just to kind of help frame this whole conversation today. The 5 of us have talked about there's so many types of people in the value chain where we're working who experience this kind of impact. So one of the first kinds of impact we're going to talk about today is impact on ourselves as leaders. How are we transforming as leaders? How do we measure that? How do we see our own growth and maybe leaders that we work with? The next sort of sphere of impact is company culture and operations. How are you impacting your team, your company, or if you're working with entrepreneurs, how are the entrepreneurs you're working with impacting their teams? Next is the entire business ecosystem. So everyone around your business, suppliers, customers, part of the supply chain. And then we get further out to this external impact, and that's really everybody else who's being impacted by things that are happening from your business. So we're going to kind of talk through, there are different tools that measure these different levels. And depending on who you are or what you're trying to learn about your organization or your impact, there might be different kinds of tools to help you measure those different spheres. So we'll kind of come back to that picture as we think through. But that's the intro. I'm going to pass it back to Colin.
Thanks, Sylvie. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to go through just a couple of the features on why we believe impact measurement is important. We're going to keep it as unsubjective as possible and give you a good sense of some of the trends that are taking place around the world right now that affect you as entrepreneurs, as capacity builders, investors, ecosystem leaders, whether you're based in Romania or whether you're based in any other part of the world. To summarize those 5 forces, I've categorized them into into the following. First of all, accountability. We live in an age where there is a significant amount of stakeholder accountability related to who you are and what you do. And one of the key factors around accountability is not just being held to account, it's about what is in those accounts when you get held to them. Does that make sense? So the point about accountability, it's not just about financial accountability anymore. It's about what is your accountability to the society in which you operate, the environment in which you may depend. And that doesn't matter only where your product is produced, it also matters where your products and services are delivered. And so the implications of that accountability are no longer local, they're no longer within your internal environment. As Sylvie mentioned earlier, it's also about the external environment as well. I think another key feature, which is no longer just a Christian principle, but is becoming an increasingly secular held principle, is care. What is the intention behind investment? There are still significant, I would say, bodies of investors who are driven by purely financial return. But for those investors who have looked at the general trends around the world around sustainability, if that's all you're caring about, you are missing the risks on your investment that are most certainly sitting in your social and environmental horizons. The third one is commitment. What is your commitment as a business? Your business is more than just the products and services that you sell. It is about your reputation. And it's not just the reputation in your marketplace and the way that your customers understand your products and their quality. It also comes down to the type of company that you are, the type of leader that you are, and the environment that you offer both partners and suppliers in engaging with you. But most importantly, it is with regards to the team that serves your business and actually makes that possible. One example is that I don't know if you're experiencing this within your businesses, but certainly within the clients that we work with, and with my business in particular, there is a very strong demand from talent, sometimes the best talent in your business that's absolutely critical, to be connected to a purpose. It's one thing saying that you have values, it's a completely different thing being able to evidence those values. And that is fundamentally the premise behind why impact measurement is so important. The next phase comes to relationships. Now, we spoke about this a little bit in the opening. Business, in my observation, and I'll happily go into this in detail with you after the session if you'd like to go into more detail. I believe that business has always been about relationships. I think that it has just become increasingly transactional over time, and what we are realizing with the fragmentation of society is the only way that we actually hold business systems together is through relationships that are founded on trust and confidence. And trust and confidence is about all these other factors as well. It's about accountability, care, and commitment. And what makes relationships work, if you think about your personal relationships, it's not just about those three factors, but it moves into the fifth one, which we believe is driving business practice globally, which is around transparency. And that transparency is not something that is just a biblical principle. We see it as becoming a principle in the way that you not only account for your business, but in the way that you actually start marketing your business and communicating your business in any type of its reporting. And we are seeing regulations and legislation being passed down from various levels. I think very importantly for those of you that operate in the European market, where European regulations specifically are calling for transparency around environmental, social, as well as financial factors more than ever before. So just to move on to a few examples for you, the one thing that we need to consider when it comes to accountability is how we've done as a global population, as a species, in terms of our dependence on the environment in which we operate. I'm sure you all agree that if it is not for the very precious resource that we have called planet Earth, we would not be sitting in this room in a state of health. We are not doing well in terms of looking after those boundaries, and certainly from a kingdom perspective, as Christ followers, being good stewards is certainly not only something that we've been called to. I think we've been deluded by the concept of dominion over those resources as to exactly what that means. And I believe that there is not just a call biblically to return to what the fundamental purpose and what the message is behind being good stewards. I think there is significant shifts within the secular environment that is pointing out these realities and saying, if we do not do something about this, we're all going to suffer and the future is not going to be as bright as we all could hope. Secondly, moving to company valuations. If you look at how companies are valued on various stock exchanges at the moment across the world, less than 10% is actually a function of their balance sheet, the tangible assets that sit there in terms of plant, equipment, and so on. The majority of businesses and their valuation is based on reputation. And that reputation can crumble in a moment, as I'm sure you've seen with some businesses that get caught up in scandals. Suddenly share prices fall. Why? Because there's significant risks that other stakeholders are going to lose trust in that particular business and its future ability to provide earnings. And I'm sure this is a case which you are all quite familiar with in terms of your businesses as well. Our businesses are a function of expectations, reputation, and trust. If we fail in any one of those areas, we will lose our ability to grow. And we certainly will lose the value of those businesses and everything that we built up. How to support that? Be clear in what you say, and then say, first of all, say what you do, and then do what you say. We feel that what is fundamental behind all of this, and one way, if you're asking, well, how do we address these complexities? It's to be more aware of the stakeholder systems in which you operate. How well do you know your stakeholders, not just your customers? How well do you know your investors or donors? How well do you know your partners and suppliers, your clients, your team, and the technology that you use and why they all work together? What are the bonds? What are the relationships that keep the information and value flowing between those relationships? Another key factor, which for some of you may be familiar with, is that company reporting is changing. If you think about each one of your businesses at the moment and you approach an investor, the one thing that they would most likely ask for is your financial statements. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware that when you put down those financial statements in front of certain investors, most investors, if you give them financial statements, will look at them and have an understanding of the structure of the information that you are providing. The reason for that is because there are certain rules and frameworks applied to how you present that financial information. And the organization that gives guidance to that is an organization called IFRS, which is sitting in the middle of that diagram on the screen in front of you. If you don't know who IFRS is, I strongly recommend you find out. If you run a business, it is good to know what IFRS is, because IFRS is the company that defines, the organization that defines the way information is presented and what you would need to present to investors and what you probably already are presenting to investors. A key shift in their move in the last 3 years has been the introduction of not only accounting standards, which defines those financial statements, but sustainability standards as well. And so there is a very likely future, and I would say it's 5 to 10 years into the future. It's already being initiated now. It's already being applied to larger organizations within each one of your markets, but it is going to affect all our businesses in future, where no longer will we provide a financial statement, but it's highly likely that we are going to provide impact statements according to what our environmental and social indicators and metrics might be. Finally, how to make sense of all of this. I've said the principle before that the key aspect about impact measurement, and certainly in the economies of trust that we operate within, the relational global ecosystem in which we all operate and depend, is complex. We understand this. But how to unravel that complexity, as was mentioned by Sylvie, is how do you define your impact thesis? How do you define what it is you want to do? What is the purpose of your business? And that cannot just be words. Values cannot be words on a page, in a publication, or on a wall. They need to be translated into the way that you do business, and there are no excuses anymore for not measuring what those things are. I've been in some instances with clients that says, well, how do you measure the happiness of your clients? That's possible. It's been done for more than 15 years. And I would strongly challenge any one of you, if you think there's something that cannot be measured, to come and chat to us, because we've been asked those same questions. My final word with regards to this before handing over to the next speaker is, and the purpose of this picture, is that the complexity around sustainability and finance and how these things are interconnected is complex from the outside. But like how each one of us have had to make sense of going into a foreign city and make sense of its transport system, the picture in front of you is a picture of the London Underground. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with the London Underground. Now, unless you get the map, it can be incredibly complicated. But once you get the map, You can understand where you are. You can understand your point of departure. You can assess what your various destinations are, and then you can select the mode of travel on how to get there, what the cost is, what the time is, who you're taking with you. And that is what the journey of impact measurement and management is all about. Thank you.
So good. Thank you, Colin. So that's really unpacked a lot of the why and hopefully leaves you leaning into, okay, what do I do about this? And I want to start in this next section with, well, what do we call this, right? We want to have a kingdom perspective on even impact measurement. And so the good news is, if you take the quadruple bottom line, or if you think about there's various different ways to call this, but if you take the 3 pillars of impact, economic, social, and environmental, the good news is they are actually already very well defined. So I remember when I got into this space and quit my job in secular international development, I was like, there's this wealth of indicators and frameworks that I just am excited to put in the hands of Christian entrepreneurs and business leaders. And so, for example, you have the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, you may love or hate the Sustainable Development Goals, but they are a set of globally accepted standards and goals that can help you articulate the impact that you're having, and then even underneath that, a set of common indicators and metrics. And there are other tools, such as the IRIS Plus metrics. So the good news is, in many of these areas, i.e. the economic, social, and environmental pillars, let's take job creation. There's some very clear indicators of what good job creation looks like. You don't need to start from scratch, right? As Christians, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, which is literally a wheel. But then I thought I'd just lay out that. I probably didn't need to lay out that pun anyway. However, what does that mean? How does that translate to the biblical lens that we want to have? Well, a friend of mine, Ruben, put the SDGs into a biblical lens. The good news is the SDGs actually fit a biblical lens of human flourishing that we want to see in the world. I might stand up. So under human flourishing, I'd love to put more scriptures to this, but I could pluck John 10:10. You've got SDG 1, no poverty. You've got 0 hunger, good health and well-being, quality education. Under a free and just society, you've got, I'm going to stand up just in case this, you've got decent work and economic growth, gender equality, sustainable cities. Under creation stewardship, a very important biblical mandate, as Colin said, climate action, clean water, etc. And then, obviously, the area that's not within the Sustainable Development Goals, spiritual, I've got some exciting news that there's actually a framework that a number of investors and other groups are convening, including Synapis and others. We've got a workshop later this afternoon, to define some common goals even for Christian-specific impact. And I'm putting this up there. I put working intentionally because this is not something that we believe is perfect. That's why we've got a 2-hour workshop this afternoon. We want all of you, literally, I would love to see all of you packed into that room. We'll deal with that problem later, to help us define this. And so there's some work, there's real demand and appetite. There's even such demand for this that an advisor to Institutional Wealth took it before we had finished it just to help start advising her clients towards investing. And so the good news is there's both already common frameworks and metrics for economic, social, and environmental impact, and now some quite exciting work around common goals for spiritual impact as well. And don't miss 2 p.m. This is actually you, Colin.
How's it me?
So, do you want to do this slide?
Yeah. So I think just to put things into perspective, what we want to share with you is a few diagnostics that we want to not only tell you about, but we want to share with you. And we're going to give you just a little bit of detail around each one of them. But please, we urge you to come and find us, chat to us if these sound useful. We don't have enough time to go through them in detail, but we are very well aware of the value that they can offer your organizations. They're the type of things that we would normally charge for. In this particular forum, we're happy to share them with you, and you can try them and test them and see where that goes. Okay. So first and foremost, let's get on to the one that the company that I work for is going to be sharing, which is an impact management and measurement capability assessment. Now, when you have a look at your organizations and if what we are talking about today, how well equipped is your organization to not just measure impact, but measure impact? Right? Now, each one of you will have a certain current state, your point of departure. This might sound like a whole lot of new information. We hope it's the type of information that you're excited about and want to get involved with. And so that's going to demand a certain set of shifts to get you to a desired state. And what our capability assessment effectively guides your organization, tells you where you are in relation to a number of factors. Let's go back to those. And those factors are around your strategy, your talent, your processes, your technology, your data, your measurement, and your reporting. And based on your assessment, the way that you answer those questions, it delivers a report which gives you an idea of where you sit in the impact management and measurement maturity index that we've designed, which starts at nascent. So you're starting off and you're starting to understand it. Is your capability emerging, i.e., is there something happening in your organization that allows you to start measuring and managing impact? And how does that translate to expanding that capability across the rest of the team? How does it optimize inside the rest of your organization? How well are you not just measuring impact and maybe putting out a report, but how is it guiding your performance as a whole? And then at a point of maturity, where impact management is a practice in your organization. It is something that everybody knows something about, and it is as important to you, if not more important to you, than your financial management. We see a future in a very near horizon where impact management will be the dominant practice in the way that you measure and manage risk. Finance will just be one factor in understanding what that impact is. So if you would like your business to have a go at running an assessment, we'd be happy to take your details and share that report with you.
So I want to bounce back to the leader first circle. And this was actually a diagnostic that we put together after producing a number of other assessments that were more in depth and just said we want to get something quite light touch out there. And I'm actually going to say the first 5 people that want this, I'll give to you for free. Because this is something we want to get out there and get your feedback on. And so this is lightweight. It's going to probably offend the more robust impact measurement people at the end of it. No, I joke. This is not impact measurement. This is helping you think about 2 things. One, that are actually very important. One, your personal and spiritual well-being, right? So we take the same framework as in a more in-depth assessment of all of your employees and ask some questions about your personal well-being. No one else sees this. You take the assessment. It drops an automated report straight to your inbox that you can talk through with a mentor or a coach or just reflect on with the Lord. But it also asks some questions around your intentionality towards impact and also just some self-reflections on, honestly, some of those important questions around your likelihood of burnout and your likelihood of team burnout. And so this is just a lightweight assessment that we hope will get you on the journey. Secondly, we had built some tools and had a partner and a client who I think are here, Israel First Fruits. They're incredible. So to us, well, what about every area of the business, right? We want to integrate trying to be redemptive in every area of the business. And so we built this diagnostic that helps you think about whether you're both excellent and redemptive. Like Colin said, we don't want impact to be a side thing, but it should be part of the whole. And so we reviewed something like 20 plus excellent, what I would say kind of excellent, best in class, world leading, talking McKinsey, Gallup, Hyatt, all of those organizational assessment tools, because again, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Good HR practices are good HR practices. But also we're called to go beyond that and using the praxis language of being redemptive. And so in addition, we reviewed 15 plus kingdom frameworks, including practices and others, about what it looks like to be redemptive in each of those areas. And so you'll see an example up here. It's I don't know if it's pretty graphics. There's even a typo. But But the report is being automated. And again, I would love some of you to test this out, and we're going to have it off the shelf soon. But it will help you think about all of those areas, including impact evaluation and kingdom impact, not to the level of robustness, but thinking about it as a whole. And so honestly, this is going to be an assessment that it's going to be hard to score high on. If any of you know B Corp, nobody gets 100, right? And there's a reason for that, because as Praxis says, it's a journey of moving towards redemptive. And so the assessment will say, hey, you scored 50, but these are the quick wins to become more excellent and redemptive in your marketing and fundraising, for example. I want to move now into the area of from diagnostics to impact tools. And the first tool that we actually built during lockdown, I hosted a number of focus groups with folks like you, and I said, what would impact mean to you? And one of the feedback was, well, before I think about all the amazing things we do externally as a company, I'd love to just know that this is an internally healthy kingdom company where employees are flourishing. And so we built an assessment based on Praxis's Rule of Life, Synapse's Kingdom Business Framework, and the marks of a faith-driven entrepreneur, and turn that into an assessment that looks at both culture and employee well-being or flourishing based on both the core foundations of culture, vision, and values, but going beyond that to look at things like caring for people, humility and integrity, actually which there's a lot of evidence around humility, integrity, and leadership drives more profitable businesses, but also rest and rhythm, sharing the hope. And there's a number of organizations here that we've had the privilege of working with, from India to Tajikistan to the UK to the US to Portugal. And so, yeah, it would be a real joy to talk to you about this as well. And lastly, yeah, I just want to say, one of the things is, again, I'm going to say it for the third time, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I've had the privilege of working with a number of accelerators on working out metrics around, say, entrepreneur isolation. And so, having worked with a number of these organizations, good news for some of the capacity builders in the room, we don't have to start from scratch, and be more than willing to share some of the indicators that we've already developed for similar players in this space.
Just to share kind of one tip as we transition to these guys as well. We're presenting a lot of tools today, and all the tools have different functions and different reasons that you want to measure those things. So the diagnostics that James and Colin have just shared are really kind of for understanding you as a leader, your company. You may never give those results to anyone else. That might be to understand yourself and improve your own company culture. So some of those diagnostic tools are not necessarily external reporting. We're going to talk about some external reporting, but I just want everyone to understand we collect metrics in different ways for different purposes. Some of them are really just for improving what you do and understanding what you do. Some we use for reporting to investors, to donors. Both are critical, and you should do both. So these tools kind of help you do all of those things. So as you're listening to the different tools that are here, just think through, what do you most need to figure out in your organization? Do you need to report? Do you just need to improve yourself? And then kind of find the tool that fits with your need.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks also, Colin, to making so clear why impact measurement is important. But I think it got also quite clear that it's also a lot, right? Like, these are new tasks that require new skills, that require new expertise, and also capacity. And at Leonardo, we are there to make this entire process easy, right? Because it is complex. It is a scientific topic to measure something. And we help you with our software platform to collect the data, to process the data, and to use it, not just for reporting, but also for monitoring and management. So let me give you a really practical run through how we are working. And you can basically follow the same steps even without us. It's pretty generic. How do you do proper impact measurement? So first, you need to understand, what do you want to measure, right? That is really the first challenge. And we are super grateful that there are these frameworks. As James said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And sometimes we need to invent new stuff when it comes to the spiritual dimension, for example, where James is leading. But we have frameworks that can be used for proper impact measurement, but you still need to identify the right ones, right? So what are meaningful indicators that you can use to report and manage your impact? That is really the first challenge. And then put on top of that regulatory requirements that come in more and more, as Colin said, and also stakeholder requirements, your investors. I mean, we have a couple of customers who have just 2 or 3 investors. All of them bombard them with different templates for impact reporting. And so there is a lot to figure out in the very first phase. And we help you in having a harmonized impact measurement framework where you can understand what are the metrics that comply with all of these requirements from a regulatory side, but also to comply with all my stakeholder requirements, while also being meaningful enough to really capture the impact that you want to create, that you can use it, again, not just for reporting, but also for management. So that is the first step. As a result, you get a harmonized impact framework that you can really use for reporting and management. Second step is you need to collect data somehow, right? You need to fill these frameworks. The framework is great, but it doesn't really tell you anything about the impact that you are creating unless you start collecting data. And very roughly, there are 3 buckets of data sources that are also, again, very generic, but that we are also using at Leonardo. So first, surveys are important if you talk about social impact. And surveys, we do not necessarily mean surveys that a capacity builder or an investor gives to the company they are supporting, but really surveys with the people who are affected by projects, by products, right? These can be people in the value chain of a company, suppliers, employees, and also customers. And we want to understand through primary data, by talking to these people, what are the actual effects. And this gives you great data for reporting, for impact stories, but again, also to understand your blind spots, to understand where is impact created and where maybe not, to be able to manage risks and also tell good stories. Second, we have forms. These are the kind of surveys that you would run with an organization, so just one person who is responsible in the company for reporting, who fills out different questionnaires to come to the right data points, very intuitive, so that you always know what do you need to report and when. And lastly, integrations are super helpful because most of the time some data already exists, either through IoT devices that you have, I don't know, digital smart meters, for example, to measure your electricity consumption or generation, or you might have, you're maybe working in agroforestry and you have some access to satellite imagery or something. So there is already data available, digital data points, and we can connect them to your impact management tool so that you have all the data in one place and use it for impact management. Third, a lot of effort is created when you then want to process that data, right? So that is what we see a lot, and also what I experienced when I was working for a social enterprise before starting Leonardo, is that so much effort is really involved in doing something with the data, right? And that is the sad thing. Even companies that start collecting data, most of the time it just dies in Excel sheets and nobody takes another look at it. So we help you to process that data automatically. We have some AI going on to help you validate that data also, to detect outliers, to improve data quality. And then we bring it to dashboards like the one that you can see here that help you to manage your impact on a portfolio level, where you see your different projects, maybe different companies that you are investing in or supporting, and you really understand what is the impact over time. We have different analytics, different filters that help you to go deeper, right? To not just report this as a compliance check, but to understand it as a management tool. And I have a little button down there that says demo, and I will skip the demo. But if you want to see a demo, I will be across the room later today and also tomorrow. We have a little Leonardo banner there. So if you want to see the tool and play around a little bit with it, I will be there today and tomorrow. Let me end with one particular example. We have one client called Serengeti Energy, and Serengeti Energy is building renewable energy power plants in sub-Saharan Africa. They are creating hundreds of jobs, and they are also giving access to electricity to many, many people. But they go beyond this, just this number, how many people have access to electricity because of our product. that would be an output number, right? If you imagine or if you remember this value chain that Sylvie was talking about, like just the number of people you support is just an output metric, and it doesn't tell you anything about the actual impact that you are creating. And so they work with us to define an impact framework that helps them to actually understand their true impact. And so they have also KPIs like life satisfaction or quality of life. Do their interventions really change something about the quality of life of these people that they are serving? And we help them to collect data and also to report that data, but also to analyze this data. And let me end with that, because again, it is so important to use this data not just to make your stakeholders happy, to report well, but to use it for further engagement with your impact. And what we did is through our analytics, we discovered some significant gender impact. So when you see those graphs on the slide, the overall quality of life was at a 6 on a scale from 1 to 10. But then our analytics showed that the gender impact was quite different, right? So the men were reporting a quality of life of 6 and the women only of 3 based on the project that was conducted. And that would have never been visible if they would have not collected data in the first place, and also not if they used that data for further analytics, understanding their impact, right? And it helped them to really derive meaningful implications for their projects and for their products to work on this, right? Again, it is about mitigating risks. It is about understanding where you create positive impact and scaling that further, but also identifying blind spots, identifying risks, and managing those as well. Thank you.
We want to give as much time for Q&A as possible, so I'm going to try and go through this with less passion, and so that'll take less time. So it's great to be here, my first time at Forge. None of you have ever heard of me or my company, but we are a social enterprise that started in Myanmar, Southeast Asia, about 13 years ago. We are a capacity builder, to use the shared term here, but think of an incubator business support organization. And through the process of doing our work in that particular place, we decided to build our own software tools to support our work rather than trying to cobble things together off the shelf like many of you have to do. So we do have a kind of an end-to-end platform that we built that facilitates the kind of the training and digital learning of an entrepreneur through to the mentors and coaches that are working through the capacity builders to support them, and then to the analytics side so that you can measure and understand your impact. And part of that is what you might consider more standard impact surveys. Think of like quarterly or annual lists of questions that you're going to be asking your entrepreneurs. But these are they're static, they're point in time, and there's a problem that we aren't able to address fully through tools like that. And so what we've been doing is thinking about the day-to-day interactions between an entrepreneur and the support organization, whoever that might be. This is especially relevant for capacity builders and entrepreneurs, but funders and investors obviously also care. Those of you in this room care to connect back to those 5 pillars or themes of what drives what we do differently. We care about more than that. We especially care about the human touch, the personal interactions between support and the entrepreneurs who are struggling through these things. And so we've been exploring the kind of new technologies that are available and thinking about this idea of what is the value that a business owner gets out of impact surveys and answering all those questions. And that sometimes there's not a direct link always. We just have to do it. We have to measure those things. But how do we turn that back into value for the entrepreneur? And that takes quite a bit of work. So kind of the meme here is, why are they asking me so many questions? I'm looking for support, and these questions aren't directly support. They're indirectly support. So there's incentives needed to motivate entrepreneurs to answer the static surveys, to give us their data in different ways. And so we as capacity builders have to be really clear about our value proposition. This is why we're asking you these things. This is what value you're going to get in return. And then if you're a business support organization or a mentor, you want to have a positive impact. So you're thinking, how can what I do be more relevant, more personal for this specific entrepreneur? Because right now, I'm face-to-face with them. And so we've been working on that particular kind of value creation loop. We think there's a new frontier in data collection, especially with AI-supported, AI-augmented tools. And this helps to mitigate some of the constraints of traditional measurement methodologies, which has to be very structured by design. We have to know what we're measuring, as my colleagues have been explaining, and we need to have expected answers, expected responses, so that we can compare across the whole body of respondents. But this is not the only source of our impact data if we're able to harness some of this new technology. What if a lot of this data actually came from our day-to-day interactions and not from those surveys? Think of mentoring sessions like the mentor's notes. Think of the entrepreneur's notes, the digital learning interactions, the process of business plan creation, and their financial tracking, which is a beast to try and even get our entrepreneurs to submit anything related to financial tracking. And we think we have an idea of how to address that as well. And then bringing in external data, environmental factors, local, hyper-local news, and these different things that are actually impacting an entrepreneur's life on a daily basis. So we want to increase the data collection interfaces, not just surveys, not just the different kind of forms and outputs that we ask entrepreneurs to fill out, but again, their day-to-day interactions. So on the left side, everybody's left side, is an example of a chat-based financial tracking interaction. So instead of a traditional accounting software, this is more of an interview between what feels like a real person and the entrepreneur to discover, to uncover their accounting, to uncover the nuance behind that. And so that's one thing that we've been experimenting with. Then on the right side is an example of where we used coaching and mentoring data and the data from the entrepreneur's interaction with e-learning and business plan creation to create dynamic, on-demand summaries for each entrepreneur so that the capacity builder, the mentor, knows who is this person that I'm about to talk to, dramatically reduce kind of the prep time, the context switching from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, and bring in all the prior knowledge that we have about them to create a really targeted and useful summary for this moment in time. I need to provide this entrepreneur support today, and everything about their situation matters if I'm going to provide something of value, and so we can bring all of that data together. And this is not, this is really focused on like free text, like unstructured inputs, whereas impact surveys need to be coded, they need to be defined. That's structured. We need unstructured data to pull in, and so this is an example of Burmese language. And instead of having 4 multiple choice answers for what is impacting their business today, it's a free input box. So type anything you want. And so what you see is at least 12 different responses. And they range from, I can't actually read the Burmese from here, but things like, I have a lot of other businesses just like me in my area, or the prices of inputs have increased. And the one that's very relevant to places like Myanmar, Syria, Palestine, Ukraine is like, hello, my country's situation, right? That's what's impacting me today. And that doesn't always come through in traditional impact measurement where we have to long ago predefine what we're going to measure. So we're trying to get at what's relevant today. And the graph on the right side shows kind of the breakdown of those responses. And we were able to take the free text, which is a much kind of more accessible way for an entrepreneur to answer what's really relevant for them, and then bucket that into the specific categories and themes that the technology is noticing. And that helps us to respond at a more personal level to each entrepreneur. And I'll quickly say that this is also just a topical analysis of other interactions. And when you think about supporting entrepreneurs and kind of measuring the long-term impact and what is their story and the narrative behind the impact that our organizations are providing, it's not just pure business data that we're interested in. People here in a Chin dialect from Myanmar spoken by less than 1 million people, they're talking about relationships, they're talking about fighter jets flying overhead, they're talking about spiritual things, which is, super relevant for us, not just asking business questions. And it's important for us to know that those are also the things that are on their minds and that are impacting the choices they make in managing their businesses that we need to be aware of and responsive to. Okay, so what? Connecting back to those 5 forces that Colin was explaining, we need to go deeper and we need to understand the nuance of all of the businesses that we're supporting. As funders and investors, we need to understand not just the kind of the value per dollar invested, but those real tangible impact stories that are behind them, because that's why we do what we do anyway. As capacity builders, we want to provide more personalized and relevant today kind of support for every business that we're working with. And these new technologies that are much more accessible and affordable to all of us today through, the tools that we are thinking about, GPT and different large language models. This analysis of not just what happened, but what does it mean is able to be augmented. We're able to augment our day-to-day work with this technology in a really powerful way. So we think that leads to higher engagement from the entrepreneur, which is better data collection and improved impact tracking, because we understand more about what's in between the lines. I also will skip my demo for time, but I would be happy to share more about this later as well. So thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Adam. So I think actually all 4 of us, we're really willing, just to reiterate, we're really willing to share any of our tools, talk about them. Adam and Jan are going to do demos. I'm very happy to talk through the assessments. I think we're basically all going to make ourselves fully available to answer any questions at more depth. But we've got 15 minutes now, and we will be either here or on the other side, on sort of across the foyer after this session for probably even a full hour. So do come grab us, even bounce between us, ask all of your questions. But we've got 15 minutes, and so I'd love you to start putting questions into the session on the app. I've got a quick question that I can ask. Will this workshop's PowerPoint be shared? I think we're probably all comfortable with that, so that's a quick and easy one. Yes. There's 2 questions about spiritual impact. To avoid bias, I'm going to maybe wait for confirmation from the audience. So if more questions come in, otherwise, are there any questions from the floor whilst we potentially wait for any more questions to come in on the app? So any questions from what you've heard? Don't all rush at once. Any clarifications? Yeah, great. Does somebody mind running a mic? Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Thank you very much for your presentations. All of you basically talked about data collection and measurements and things like that. I'm just wondering if you ever thought about using your tools in popularizing the work that you do. The feeling that I get is that we're sort of like in a little cocoon, and there's like 0.001% of us, even within the Christian world, doing this kind of work. And we're talking about, measuring and, accomplishing things. But there's this great mass of people within the Christian community and the greater world out there that doesn't know what we do. So have you thought about how can you make this more popular? How can you take this to the broader market? Because you have the data.
From the results perspective, or or tools? Are you putting the tools in the hands of the public, or showcasing the data?
I think the results.
Okay.
So just drawing more people into this kind of work.
I'll speak to that. I facilitate a learning community more in the nonprofit sector. So we built a tool to help development organizations measure social and spiritual well-being, and now have a learning community of organizations willing to share their data. Part of my vision for that is that, I don't know if you've heard of the work of Harvard and others. They landed $48 million to understand human flourishing. It's getting a lot of attention. McKinsey are talking about it, lots of people. Part of my vision is that we would actually articulate through that data a Christ-centered view of human flourishing, and the data actually exists. Right, so an amazing professor called Bruce Wittick, actually we were both co-presenting a conference last week, and he presented some data on the 5 dimensions of human flourishing, including spiritual. And so, I just to your point, the challenge, and I'd almost put it to all of you, is we don't have enough data yet, right? Harvard have got like 200,000 surveys in 40 countries, and I'm encouraging this group to say, let's start sharing and learning such that we could actually speak into these worlds. Another encouragement, though, Sovereign's Capital are meeting with Harvard this week to have a conversation. So just to encourage you, those conversations are happening. And then the last thing, so that's on the charity side. On the kind of more global sort of picture side with the work that we're doing, and again, this is not me, this is just a convening of ecosystem players on that Christian Impact Framework goals, the 2 p.m. workshop. We're really intentionally engaging with the Francesco Collaborative. Okay, that's still within the Catholic tradition, but in terms of numbers, well, you've got 1 billion people globally. In terms of money, you've probably got more money than any of us can even think about. But also the faith-based group at the Global Impact Investing Network. They really want to hear. I want to encourage this room. I would say there's more interest from the secular world in the spiritual value of what we're doing than we have interest in speaking into that. So just to your point, but we don't have the data or the case studies yet to prove it. Like the economics of mutuality have data on why if you put people and planet first, companies are more long-term sustainable. I have a vision that we would start to actually have data that introducing spiritual principles and bottom lines would make the same case. And so I think we're moving in that direction. Amazing question.
Yeah, let me speak to that as well. Thanks, James, because I agree. Like, we don't have the data yet to do that. But I think what would be beautiful, even like in the context of such a conference like this one, right? Like, to get together on that ecosystem level and think about like how do we actually get there. What we are doing at Leonardo often is that we suggest to ecosystem players to have benchmark studies, basically, right? So to not like offer the service that I was talking about to one single company, but to roll it out across a portfolio of companies within one space, within one sector. Because the beautiful thing about that is that we like significantly get the price point down per company doing that, and it is currently still an expensive thing if you just want to do it for one single company. But if you want to do it for 30 or 50 or 100 companies in one sector, the price point gets down, so everyone benefits. This is how we would get the data at scale to talk about it, right? Then you don't have like one use case like I just had, but you would talk about the impact of an entire ecosystem or an entire sector. And I think like it's a good thing to be here, right? To ask these questions, and maybe we can get together like today or tomorrow, also with the ecosystem players and the capacity builders, and think how can we roll out benchmark studies that help companies to compare against each other, to also understand what is good, what is not good, get the price point down, and get data at scale to exactly have the data that you are talking about to move something at larger scales.
If I could add to that, I agree with what James and Jan are saying completely. What I want to draw your attention to as a group is this slide over here. goodness, how do we get back to the beginning? While this is happening, I'll keep on talking to you. So let me ask you a question. If somebody asked you for your financial information, and all you reported back to them was the good news of your organization, how much revenue you had, but you didn't tell them anything about the bad news, what would that be called? What would that be called if you only declared the good news in your financial information? Does anybody have a name for that? Lying, yeah. Another word, a more technical criminal word, is fraud, right? So if we think about the impact sector, and if we think carefully about the work that we collectively do, doesn't matter what role you play, whether you're an entrepreneur, etc., I think it's fair to say that most of us in this room are mission-driven in some way. Now, when it comes to your mission and the way that you package your mission, the way you communicate the data on your mission, the type of data you collect with regards to your mission, do you only collect the good news? Or do you collect the bad news as well? And when you get to the bad news, do you report on the bad news? My challenge to you is, when it comes to impact, the impact of your mission on your stakeholders, are you prepared to share the good news and the bad news? The issue with going and packaging it up, and I understand where the question is going, and I completely agree with what you're saying about popularizing the good news, is I think as a sector, the mission-driven sector, we need to look hard and deep inside ourselves to say, do we only care about the good news? Or do we care about telling the truth? Do we care about sharing the truth with our investors, with our team, with our partners? Because that's when you get to the point where your case, your impact model, your impact thesis becomes compelling, because you cater for the fact that sometimes you do things that work and sometimes you do things that don't. But the important thing is you know the difference. And you know where those differences are, and you know what to do and when to do them. That is what impact management is about. You can measure things every single minute of every day. But if you're not prepared to provide the transparency that's required to build trust and accountability within an ecosystem like the one that we're talking about, we are founding our work on very, very shifty ground. We are building foundations on sand. And I think the opportunity that we have now, that it cannot be argued that there are ways to measure things correctly, that we should do that with confidence, and we should be building foundations deep into the ground so we can build the types of things that other people can look into the mission-driven space and say, yes, that's what we do, this is how we do it, and we know it works because we've measured it, and we can actually provide the proof and the evidence for it.
So good. Any other questions? Whilst they're brewing, I just want to, I think we could tag team all day. I actually could give you 2 case studies. I'll not go into the details, but where I've seen impact reported that's a bit ugly, that's not particularly convincing. One is a charity. It's the only Christian development organization I know to get millions of dollars of secular funding. They reported both their poverty and spiritual outcomes and were totally honest about where it honestly was not pretty. And guess what? A secular funder gave them $5 million to keep doing impact research because of the transparency that built with them. Another was an example of a business where they presented, honestly, the signs of potential burnout to a board. And the board loved it because immediately they pivoted and did something about it. And so, like, these shouldn't be things that scare you, but to Colin's point, can actually build trust with investors and funders and outside partners because of that transparency. Is there one last question maybe before? Otherwise, well, I'll quickly answer because there's two spiritual impact questions on the app. Hopefully, some of the slides have answered the question, but just to talk to collaboration, yes, you know, it depends on if you think of those 5 dimensions, whom your spiritual impact is focused on. So if it's the leader, ask the leader. We have a tool, do it your own way. If it's your employees, ask your employees, right? It might be that it's in the communities, and there's a great partnership with Leonardo. We've actually embedded some of our indicators on their platform. So I can't answer the question on both of those because I don't know the who, but I'd be happy to talk about it. And just to encourage you, there are indicators and there are ways, either through tools or yes, or it might be the entrepreneurs, in which case Adam's tool could be a great way to go as well. Is there one last question? In that case, I think we shall end 2 minutes ahead of time. I want to thank you all. I think I'm allowed to do one last shameless plug. We really want to listen to the voices of local entrepreneurs with this workshop at 2 p.m. And so the whole point of this is for actual, even impact measurement, not to be another colonial, global north, global south, Western majority world exercise. And so this workshop is focused on saying, what does impact mean to you in your countries, in your contexts? And so I just want to invite you. I know there's other amazing things. If you're meant to go there, go there. Don't come to us. But would like to just invite you as an opportunity to actually help shape something at the cutting edge of this. Other than that, just want to thank this amazing panel. Why don't you give them a round of applause? And we're all available from now.